morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. It's SoulSaint here, and we got another banger video for you. So, the Fusion, it just went live. It is Thursday, September the 28th. And as of right now, we got a list of things that we're going to be looking forward to throughout the week. Actually, make that 2 weeks. As of right now, one of the things I like to do whenever I am preparing for a Fusion beforehand is to make sure I have enough resources available, which you should have been doing. You know, whether that's potions, food, silver, and energy, right? But in the midst of a Fusion event, I try to find opportunities where we can find a couple of areas where we can have overlap, or what I like to call double dipping, or maybe even triple dipping, and if we're really lucky, quadruple, quadruple dripping. Anyways, with that being said, I want to kind of break it down, and maybe we'll go over the list. This is a Fusion event calendar that we currently have live. Right now, we have the Dragon Tournament and the Champion Training Tournament that is currently active. And that's the kind of things we're looking for. We're looking for tournaments and events that are going to be kind of like on pace with each other during this calendar event. So what I did was I went ahead and beforehand I broke down some of the areas where I see that we can have some overlap, and I'm going to explain where we can have our value of maybe minimalizing the amount of energy we use so that we can save it for other events, or ways that we can take our energy and spread it over the long course. So, you know, not all of us are able to buy gems. Salute to my boy Crafty. But with that being said, let's break it down. So with this current, the set of boxes that you're going to see on this calendar, I'm going to kind of break it down per color besides the last two, and then we'll kind of go into detail why. So with the Dragon Tournament currently, there are some champions, and I don't know if you've seen me do it in previous videos. I believe I talked about it with my Solo Theodore as an example. There are certain champions out there that, even though you may be farming at lower stages of the dungeon, you'd be able to maybe build a champion up and have them devised in a way that will allow you to not only farm for the tournament points you need, but you can actually bring along food along the way, which will make your runs more effective, and you're also double dipping into, you know, the champion training event. So what I would recommend a lot of players to do during this period for the next 2 days, basically Thursday and Friday, would be to grind out basically enough points, maybe at least a couple points, at least a quarter, you know, a little bit. You maybe use some sparing energy you got from the CBC. You know, you could take your time and you can kind of cruise your way into this first day. So Thursday and maybe the first portion of Friday, you could kind of cruise your way a little bit. So a little bit of progression, you don't have to go too ham. But on Friday is when we start getting the Dungeon Divers event, which is another event that overlaps with like tournaments and dungeon tournament type events particularly. So this is an area on Friday that you can get 3 particular areas of the game, or areas of this Fusion where you can get a lot of value. So I would say going into Friday is where you want to start picking up the pace. Once Dungeon Divers event number 1 is live, you want to at least start putting the throttle in. Try to push your way to a point where you're complete with the tournament, or the Champion Training Tournament as well. Because what this is going to do is going to allow you to get your points not only in Dragon, not only in Dungeon Divers, but also in Champ Training at the same time. Now, we do have a Summon Rush event that will allow you to get an extra epic. It looks like this Fusion in particular is a little bit more generous from player side. So if you have the resources and the means to be able to get it, you can go for at least the rare, the Void Rare, or you can go for the Void Rare and the Spirit Epic that we're going to be able to get hands on. So another thing to keep in mind is that you're going to need 4 of each type, and it looks like they have 4 different types of rares that you're going to have to do. So you're going to want to make sure you're on top of these events, all right? And, you know, not mess up and miss any along the way. Now, during Summon Rushes, as well as if they normally have champion chase events when you're pulling and you're summoning champions from shards, there's a chance you can get any of these champions. So I would be very, very careful, and if you do so happen to get one, maybe you can turn off checklist a tournament or an event that you would not like to do. Like, some people don't like doing Dungeon Divers, some people don't like doing artifact enhancement events. You can kind of cross that off the list if you so happen to get an extra one within that. But keep in mind, each one of those 4 rares are unique to themselves. So you can't have 5 of the magic and then 3 of the void. It wouldn't work that way. You need to have 4 and 4 and 4 and 4. So with that being said, stepping into Saturday, you should continue to be able to like make progression. By this point, I would say if you're not already wrapped up with Dragon and Dungeon Divers, you want to make sure you kind of get to completion on that way before Sunday. And the reason why is when Sunday hits, we have our next overlap, which is where you have Ice Golem, and you're still continuing in Dungeon Divers, and then, of course, you're still finishing up Champion Training. So, Ice Golem, just like Dragon, although you may not farm the exact highest, and this all depends on where your account is at. If you have a more effective farmer at the higher stages where you can slot in some food, by all means, go ahead and do that. You can also add some food in there too as well while you're grinding out the ice golem portion of it while you're also completing Dungeon Diver. So this is the second set of areas where you can kind of get like a little bit of an overlap between events. So if you haven't already finished the Dungeon Diver event 1 during this period and Ice Golem tournament has gone up, you can kind of shift over to that dungeon and still get progression in those tournaments and events, okay? Now, in the middle of this too, we also have the arena takedown. Believe it or not, I believe amongst all the events that you would participate in the fusions that you normally see, like this one for Bambus, Classic Arena is pretty easy. They're not very demanding in terms of resources. I think like maybe 1 to 4 refills tops. As long as you're winning some fights and stuff, you should pretty much get through this pretty easily. So I would say outside of just making sure you're active and, you know, daily using your medals or your arena tokens to get, you know, your dailies in and maybe a little bit more on top of that, you should be able to get through Classic Arena pretty easily. Don't sleep on it because it can creep on you, but definitely don't stress out too much about it, all right? Now, we do have an artifact enhancement event. This is where being prepared with silver is going to be an important factor that you're going to want to take care of. As soon as you get it, you can do it immediately. You could do it, you know, pretty much towards the middle of the end. As long as you get it done, this is the most important thing. But pre-prepared silver is where this is where it comes into handy. Now, if you're also farming in these dungeons and you're looking for particular gear, you know, you kind of got to a certain point in the game and you're kind of like, I need to get rid of the bad and keep only the good. You're probably going to be generating some silver revenue along the way with Dragon and Ice Golem tournaments. So this is a great opportunity to kind of pay due with what you know, basically your reward for farming those dungeons. Maybe there's a couple speed pieces you got from Dragon you want to enchant, or maybe a curse set you've been trying to build up from Ice Golem. This would be a good time to maybe grab a couple of those pieces and maybe enchant them. Now, the cost between accessories and actual artifacts, so like, you know, your weapon, your chest, and, you know, the top 2 rows of your gear palette, those are probably a little bit more cheaper than the accessories. So if you're running low on resources, or you don't have a lot of like silver to work with, I'd probably look towards enchanting mostly the artifact side instead of the accessory side a little bit more. But if you do have the luxuries and you've been like, yo, I've been waiting to enchant this one particular piece for one of my champions, like an accessory wise, then by all means, you know, you do what you got to do. But use your resources as frugal as you can, because remember, we got more stuff down the road that we're going to want to make sure we're available for. In particular, after Artifact 1, we jump into Artifact 2, Enhancement 2, so that's coming up as well. Now, this brings us to our next overlap. On Wednesday, creeping into pretty much Thursday, we have another set of events that are going to kind of overlap. This one is mostly just a double dip, so it's Fire Night and Dungeon Divers event 2. And I don't know if you noticed it before on the blue or teal looking like bracket here. Ice Golem, the tail end of Ice Golem, also goes into Dungeon Divers 2. So I normally would suggest that like players for like Dragon Tournament and Dungeon Divers 1, you get at least a halfway point with Dungeon Divers 1, but you finish off Dragon Tournament. And then you take the other half of Ice Golem to finish the other half of Dungeon Divers 1, and then you get the other half from Dungeon Divers 2. Once that is done, you should already be done with Ice Golem. And then the last half of Dungeon Divers 2, you get it with Fire Night, the Fire Night tournament, and that's how you catch that overlap, where it's like you're not stressing yourself too much out amongst the Dungeon Diver events, but you're still getting the tournaments done along the way, so that, you know, you're spacing it out pretty proportionally. Okay. Now, we do have another champ training event too as well that's going to hit us on Thursday, and that one can be a little bit tough because unless you have the right resources and the right builds to make your duo engine or whatever have you to allow you to have some additional food, you are going to have to take some time aside from farming Fire Night to farming some champions and champ training. Maybe you go to one of those dungeons you can do it more effectively at, or you want to go to maybe like the campaign side of things, go back to 12.3, you know, get some free silver there while you're also generating some experience for your food. There's a lot of different ways you could do it. Of course, you got your tavern resources, brews and whatnot will help you out there too along the way. But hopefully, as long as you're keeping and maintaining a pace, the key to like being able to have enough resources for fusions is you're not blowing all your resources at the beginning and then you fall short in a later. It's all about keeping a consistent pace, right? Now, with that being said, Champion Chase Tournament comes up as well on Friday, and also Classic Arena Takedown 2. That gets a little spicy because if you did go for the Epic on Friday, that will clear up a little bit for you across the board. Now, I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to take a look in game to see which ones take from which champions from the rare you could take for each epic, and we'll go into a little breakdown here. It looks like if you get an extra one of these, it's basically just a copy of one set of each of those rares. So you could probably take away from like, you know, 3 or 4 events and then just kind of go from there. And that might be a way you can kind of get through some of these events. And maybe you can skip the champion chase as an example. Now, mind you, it does only give you the void here. And that's something to kind of keep in mind. So if you don't get the void, you still have to worry about getting maybe the other pieces or whatever. Like I said, you want to plug and play those pieces, and I'm excluding the extra epic you can get from the Summer Rush as an example of just assuming you don't have a lot of shards to work with, okay? Which most of the times nobody does, right? So with Champion Chase, and the difference between Summer Rush and Champion Chase is what you get. So it's more important that you're very aware of how you can get a lot of your better champions out of the way. So like if you have fragment champions, you haven't claimed for like CBC, for example. Like for example, I'm sitting on a Gerda from my fragment collection from Daily Login. I could use that, and that'll give me a substantial amount of points. The higher the rarity, the higher the quality, the more you're going to be able to get more value out of your points, right? Whereas with Summer Rush, it's what you use, right? So you're actually going to have to use, shards to get them. So you want to use a respectable amount to get the number you need, and then you move on, right? But with Champion Chase, you need to get a specific, amount of quality champions. So certain type of shards will have more value down the road comparatively to either one of them. If you're close to Mercy on, for example, like your ancient shards, then during Champion Chase would probably be the better time to get those because it's less resource intensive, but you're still getting higher quality. Whereas like with Summer Rush, even though you may be close to Mercy, it doesn't matter if you get a legendary. You may want to just get those couple of sacreds in, maybe a couple of voids in to get the number you're looking for, because you get points based off of the type of shard you're using instead of what you get. So just understanding the two differences there is kind of important. Now, with that being said, we have our next overlap event. That's going to be kind of important. I'm excluding Arena. It's the same thing as Classic Arena Takedown number 1. This is another repeat of number 2. You just got to basically cruise your way through it. Don't neglect it, but make sure you're on top of it and, use maybe a couple refills if you're sitting on it, get some points, maybe upgrade your Great Hall along the way, something around those lines, but just make sure you're aware of it. However, the next big overlap that's going to be kind of important to be observant about is the Spider Tournament and the Dungeon Divers 3 event. This is a great event for many reasons. And number one would be a lot of times when you're having multiple artifact enhancement events, like in particular with this fusion, there's 3. Your resources start getting weighed. I normally hold a value of at least a minimum of like 15 million silver, and that's me kind of playing it a little extreme per artifact enhancement event. The more prepared you are, if you already got some pieces that are like plus up to 15, that by means maybe that number can change or shift depending on how lucky you are. Because sometimes getting that last 15 to 16 could take you an extra 2 or 3 mil because RNG is just not on your side. But I use a general rule of like a minimum of like 15 mil per each artifact enhancement to safely get through it. By this point, if you have artifact enhancement 1 and 2 done, you're already down, let's assume 30 mil. And if you don't have the extra 15, this could be a little bit of a stress on your resources. So Spider Tournament, as well as just Spider in general, is a great place to get like a lot of value in terms of silver per energy. So it's probably the best place to farm for silver, for lack of a better word. So this is a great place to recoup some of your resources while you're transitioning from Saturday, Sunday into the later portion of Sunday, and of course all the way up until Wednesday where Artifact Enhancement 3 is in. So these pieces and armors and gears that you'll be getting along the way amongst all these different tournaments would be a great time for you to do it during the Artifact Enhancement window, is when I would start enchanting. But of course, the more prepared you are before fusions, the better it is, and pretty much after that point you have everything you need. Now, a little cheat code in terms of like ways you can get some more value out of it. We talked about it's what you get, not what you used to get it. Believe it or not, in the fusion itself, and this is the last little bit I'll let you before we let you go, guys, today, is these right here. When you're fusing up and you're fusing up into a champion, whether you're summoning it from the fragment summon or from a fusion, if you save these champions, you have them prepped up and you have them ready to fuse, but if you save them until Champion Chase, that's extra points where you can kind of get value not only from the fusion itself, but points for the Champion Chase for the fusion. So it makes life a lot easier, and I think that's going to be one way that you can kind of maybe spare some of your resources from a shard summoning requirement, maybe even save the fragment summon champions for something down the road if you have enough to kind of get you over the gap. So with that being said, I've been on a no pull September. I think this fusion is actually going to be a nice little hurrah to be able to say I did it, and we'll be able to pull a couple of shards as a part of some of these fusions, so I'm looking forward to it. And with that being said, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns about this fusion, feel free to let me know in the comments below. It definitely helps us drive some conversation and come to a better understanding of what's going on. And with that being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and with that, always remember, stay ascended.
So